Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We're here today to really get into it, get into the nitty-gritty of a company that's making some serious waves in the autonomous driving world, and that's Horizon Robotics.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners are probably already familiar with Horizon Robotics, at least to some degree, but we have a lot of great material on them. We're going to be looking at their 2024 financials, their strategic positioning, really try to drill down to what matters most, for investors like you guys.
Yeah, exactly. We've got their annual report, obviously, plus some other financial news, and yeah, the plan is to kind of hit on 5 big things. First, we're going to look at why the revenue jumped so much, especially because, they call 2024 a transition year. We're going to zoom in on who their big customers are, who's buying what, and what that means. After that, we'll get into the whole J5 to J6 chip transition. That's huge, right?
Yeah.
Then we'll talk about, and this is kind of a surprise, just how big a deal software is for their revenue. And finally, we'll wrap it up with a good look at their overall financial health, debt, R&D spending, that sort of thing. How does that sound?
Sounds like a plan. Let's dive in.
Okay, so first things first, 2024 saw Horizon's revenue climb a crazy 53.6%. They hit 2.4 billion RMB, which if you're keeping score at home, that's about 2.384 billion.
Yeah.
And like I said, they called this year a transition year because they were switching from, the J5 chip series over to the J6. So on the surface, that seems weird, right?
Yeah, it does seem counterintuitive on the surface, but, you got to look deeper. When you see growth like that during a so-called transition year, I think the first question for any smart investor is where'd that growth come from?
Yeah.
And in Horizon's case, the answer is pretty clear. The Horizon Mono product line.
And that's, for anyone who, needs a quick refresher, the Mono is their advanced driver assistance system.
That's exactly, KDS. And the sources here, they show that Horizon actually grabbed the biggest slice of the Chinese ADAS market with Mono. So even though everybody was waiting for the new J6 chip, their older tech was still selling like hotcakes.
Right.
And there's another piece to this that's really important, especially if you're thinking long-term, global market kind of stuff. Horizon inked a deal with a big-time global Tier 1 supplier. And just so everyone's clear, Tier 1 means they supply parts directly to car manufacturers. And this deal is all about their next-gen mono design. So they're definitely making moves to go global.
That makes a ton of sense. I think a lot of investors are looking at Horizon and saying, okay, they're killing it in China, but what's their next move? And this partnership seems to answer that question.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about who's actually buying all this stuff. We've got the revenue breakdown from their top 3 customers in 2024 compared to 2023, and there are some pretty big changes. Customer A went from 40.43% of revenue down to 31.50%. Customer C also dropped from 12.49% down to 7.93%. But then there's customer B. They just exploded, going from a tiny 2.95% all the way up to 17.40%.
Yeah, that's a huge jump. And it really highlights how things are shifting in the EV and autonomous driving space. So the sources we're looking at, they tell us that customer B is none other than BYD. BYD, one of the biggest EV makers in the world right now. And in 2024, they really started loading up on Horizon's J2 and J3 based products. And this is really important to understand because customers A and C, they're actually long-term partners that Horizon has already had for a while. We're talking about Volkswagen's Cariad, that's customer A, and Li Auto, that's customer C. Now, the fact that BYD jumped in and became such a major customer, that's huge for Horizon. It means they're not just relying on, 1 or 2 big players anymore. They're diversifying their revenue stream. And for investors, that's a big green flag. It lowers their risk significantly.
Less reliance on Volkswagen. That was definitely a concern for some investors, especially after the IPO. So, okay, let's move on to this transition from J5 to J6. Sounds like a pretty critical moment for the company.
Absolutely. I mean, the J6, it's not just a minor upgrade. This is a whole new generation of chips with way more processing power and efficiency. And that's absolutely essential for, if they want to achieve higher levels of autonomous driving. So naturally, as the J6 was getting closer to launch, demand for the J5 started to slow down a little. But Horizon, they were smart about it. They used 2024 to really get J6 development kits into the hands of their ecosystem partners.
And who are those partners, just to be clear?
Yeah, good question. These are the companies who are building the software, the applications that actually run on Horizon's chips. They're the ones who are ultimately going to convince car manufacturers to adopt this technology.
Got it. And it sounds like BYD played a big role in building hype for the J6, right?
Totally. When BYD came out and publicly endorsed the J6 in early 2025, that sent a massive signal to the whole industry. Basically, BYD was saying, hey, This J6 chip is the real deal. It works. It's powerful. Get on board. And you can see the impact of that endorsement when you look at Horizon's 2024 financials. There was a huge surge in prepayments,
Yeah.
meaning car companies were so confident in the J6, they were willing to put money down before it even launched. That's a really strong indicator that the J6 is going to be a major revenue driver in 2025 and beyond.
So even though 2024 was, a transition year, in terms of their chips, it seems like they set themselves up for massive success in 2025. Now let's talk about this software thing, because this really jumped out at me. In 2024, software brought in a whopping 69.1% of Horizon's total revenue. That's up from 62.1% the year before. And to put that in perspective, hardware, the actual chips, only accounted for 28%. So as an investor, I'm looking at that and thinking, wow, there's a bigger story here.
Yeah, you're right. That's a really key insight, and it speaks to a fundamental aspect of how Horizon operates, especially in the Chinese B2B landscape. They're not just selling chips, they're selling a whole ecosystem of intelligent driving solutions.
Give me some examples, like how are they making money from software?
Okay, so let's break it down. First, you've got licensing fees for their algorithms and tool chains. For the older J2 and J3 stuff, those licenses were going for like $200,000 to $500,000. The newer J5 and J6 licenses, those are even pricier, over $1 million a pop. And then you've got their ecosystem partners, remember them, the software developers. Well, those companies are paying over 1.5 million RMB just to be listed in Horizon's product catalog.
So basically paying for access to Horizon's network of potential customers.
Exactly. And then there's another really interesting angle here. There's talk that Horizon might start licensing out their perception algorithms, which are like the brains of their self-driving tech, to big players like BYD. So even if they're not selling the chips themselves, they can still generate a ton of revenue from their software expertise.
That's really fascinating. So they're not just a chip company, they're like an intelligent driving solutions provider, like you said. All right, let's switch gears and talk about their financials. Always a crucial factor for investors. So in 2024, Horizon poured a ton of money into R&D.
They did. We're talking 3.1 billion RMB. That's a 33% jump from the previous year. And what's really interesting here, from an investor standpoint, is that their R&D spending was actually double their gross profit, which was 1.841 billion, with a gross margin of 77.2%. That's huge. It shows how committed they are to staying ahead of the curve in autonomous driving technology.
Yeah, that's a bold move, but it shows they're playing the long game.
Exactly. And to do that, you need top talent. Horizon has a team of 2,078 employees, and their total compensation for 2024 was 2.45 billion RMB. That tells you they're not skimping on attracting and retaining the best engineers and developers.
Makes sense. But, big spending on R&D, big salaries, that can sometimes be a red flag, especially if a company is loaded with debt. What's the story there?
That's where things get really interesting. After their IPO, Horizon managed to significantly reduce their debt. They went from 40.5 billion RMB down to 8.4 billion RMB. And on top of that, they're sitting on a nice pile of cash, about 15 billion RMB. So yeah, they're investing heavily, but they've got the financial strength to back it up.
That's a good sign. A strong balance sheet is always reassuring.
Good.
Okay, so stepping back a bit, what does all this tell us about Horizon's overall position in the autonomous driving market? It's a pretty competitive space, right?
It is, but Horizon is definitely making smart moves. Getting listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange back in October 2024, that was huge. Gave them more access to capital and boosted their international profile. And then there's the partnership and joint venture with Volkswagen Group's Cariad. We talked about that a little earlier. That deal involved a 1.3 billion RMB investment from Volkswagen and a 600 million RMB contract. That's not small potatoes.
Definitely not. And how about their market share in China? Sounds like they're doing pretty well there.
Yeah, they're crushing it. By the end of 2024, they had over 40% of the OEM, original equipment manufacturer, ADS market in China. Think about that for a second. Their solutions are being used by 27 different OEMs across 42 brands in 290 car models. That includes every single one of the top 10 Chinese automakers. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's huge. So what's next? What's the outlook for Horizon?
Well, they hit another big milestone in 2024. They've got 152 models in mass production using their tech, and they're forecasting that they'll ship over 10 million units of their Journey series chips. The industry as a whole is projected to grow like crazy. Smart driving penetration, both globally and in China specifically, is expected to skyrocket. China's aiming to hit over 80% penetration by 2026 and almost 100% by 2030. So the market's there, the demand is there, and I think Horizon, with their ability ability to adapt, their focus on software, their partnerships, and their strong financial discipline, they're in a really good position to capitalize on this growth. But, as always, it all comes down to execution. 2025 is going to be a big year they need to deliver.
All right, so let's wrap this up with some key takeaways for our investor audience.
Absolutely. So here's the bottom line. Horizon saw strong revenue growth in 2024, even though it was a transition year for their chip technology. That growth was largely driven by their dominance in the ADS market. They've also diversified their customer base significantly, with BYD becoming a major player. The prepayment numbers suggest that their new J6 chip is going to be a big hit in 2025. Their software revenue is a much bigger part of their business than many people realize, and it provides a nice, stable income stream. And finally, they're investing heavily in R&D, but they've got a solid financial foundation to support that spending.
So as you're looking at investment opportunities in the autonomous vehicle sector, remember what we've talked about today. Horizon's ability to grow during a tech transition, their diverse customer base, their strong software revenue, and their healthy financials. These are all very positive signs. They suggest that Horizon could be a real leader in this exciting and rapidly evolving market. Thanks for tuning into the deep dive, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.